And in return, all I don't want them to cheat anything, do anything. All I want is, I want my stuff done when I need it done. That's all I ask. And the myths in business are perpetuated by conventional wisdom. And it's like these old wives' tales. And we're going to talk about some of them in a few minutes. And that's what they are. They're just only wives' tales. It's like, you get I don't know if they say this in Germany. You get a boil on your hand. If you slap it with a Bible, it's supposed to make the boil go away. A cyst, not a boil. Cyst, excuse me. A cyst. Do they have it in Germany? No? Oh, okay. No voodoo there, huh? How much of the country is Catholic in Germany?
16, but at least a third.
At least a third.
60 at least. You said most, not 60%, at least a third.
Okay, so that means that's less than 60, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm thinking like I'm back in Siemens. It's just like talking to these Rufuses. Okay, so you slap a cyst with a Bible and they say it goes away. Well, I think that's a wives' tale. You could slap it with a brick too, and maybe it'll go away. Lenin was wrong. It's religion which is the opiate of the masses. It's not opiate. It's the conventional wisdom. It's the scapegoat. It's the cop out of everything, and that's what's wrong with it. And Stefan hit upon it. We're not going to lead by conventional wisdom. You want a board, and you want a strong board, an advisory board in America, or a regular board in other countries. But at the end of the day, you make the final decision, and you will lead them, and they will back you. My experience in Germany is these guys know how to back you. They know how to circle the wagons, as they say in America, and they know how, and they can defend. Not all the decisions I've made have been Einsteinian, but they defended me like they were fucking Einsteinian. No matter what, they came up with reasons why we did that I didn't think of. Why? Her Pena did this, and he said, of course, and they all this shit, and the 4-star general. I guess he's been used to making a lot of excuses for bad decisions of officers he'd served under for all those years. So it's all possible. It's all possible. Yeah, and conventional wisdom is not wisdom. It's just conventional, and you got to remember that because there's a lot of conventional wisdom in Germany. There's a lot of conventional wisdom all over, especially for a young guy that's trying to do something different. Get a job. Get this. What are you doing? You're a bright guy. You should be able to do that. I hear that all the time. And even if you're not young, I've got a guy. I've got a guy who's just turned 40. He's a brilliant guy, and I've helped him. And we've come very close to knocking it out of the park twice, but we didn't. A lot of reasons. His girlfriend told him. He said, he came from another career. He was something else. I forget what he was. He was something important, pretty important. But 8 or 9 years ago, he decided he didn't want to do that anymore. He wanted to do something else. And he says, no, you love me for me, and this is what I'm going to do. And I want to do this, and I know, third time will be a charm, and so in that regard, touch wood, third time is a charm for us. But they say, go on, you have the ability to go back and make a lot of money. Just go back to what you used to do. We've had physicians, medical doctors that have left the practice of medicine. We had a Harvard-educated doctor here a number of years ago who didn't want to be a doctor anymore, and wanted to be something else. And her husband was a very high-profile attorney in Atlanta, Georgia. And he says, "Oh, do whatever you want to do, honey." We've had all kinds of. We've had psychiatrists here. They didn't want to be a psychiatrist anymore. We've had a lot of different things that they wake up one morning and they don't want to do what they want to do anymore. I've had a guy here who's a lawyer. A lot of lawyers don't want to be lawyers anymore. I didn't like being a lawyer from the day I started. And why are you a lawyer? Well, my dad was a lawyer, and his brother was a lawyer, and my grandfather was a lawyer, and my dad, and so that's why they're lawyers. I've had four generations of psychiatrists, and the two brothers and the sister are psychiatrists, and their father, their grandparents. And so we get locked into these things, emotional baggage, and at some point in time they wake up, why am I doing this? And a lot of it's the conventional wisdom that we've always been doctors, or we've always been lawyers. We've had a couple of really Rufus doofus that we have MD lawyers, doctor lawyers. They're really Rufus, but the worst combination is an MD MBA. You want a real Rufus doofus, it's an MD MBA. I mean, they're over the top. I don't know, they got the Jesus Christ syndrome from being a doctor, and now they think they've got the financial wisdom of whoever, and it's a real combination. But we've had those. We've had all kinds of permutations. I said this yesterday. Why is Babe Ruth remembered? We're talking about conventional wisdom, not for his strikeouts, but he's remembered for his home runs. Heavier than air, flying machines are impossible. We're talking beyond common sense, remember? Okay, that's what the Lord Kelvin said in 1895.
Might be impossible to fly machines which are lighter than air.
Flying then.
Yeah.
Robert Milken, Nobel Prize, Physics. There is no likelihood we can ever tap the power of the atom. 1920. Sensible and responsible women do not want to vote. President of the United States, Grover Cleveland, 1905. Everything that can be invented has been invented. Charles Jewell, Director of U.S. Patents, 1899. But what is it good for? Engineer at the Advanced Computing Systems Division of IBM, 1968, commenting on the microchip.
That's still the question.
Huh?
Still Gates.
Computers in the future may weigh no more than 1.5 tons. Popular Mechanics forecasting the relentless march of service, 1949. Okay? Does your computer look like this? In 1954, Popular Mechanics ran the picture with a caption below speculating that the home computer would look like 50 years later in 2004. Scientists from Rand Corporation have created this model to illustrate how a home computer could look in the year 2004. However, the technology will not be economically feasible for the average home. Also, the scientists admit that the computer will require not yet invented technology to actually work, but 50 years from now, scientists expect to solve these problems. Teletype interface and the Fortran language. With teletype interface and Fortran. That's what I learned in college, Fortran. I hear it's coming back. Is Fortran coming back? No? Okay. The computer will be easy to use.
It's still taught.
Yeah? Okay. Now, how wrong can we fucking be? Now, nobody have a computer. Well, I have one. I probably have this whole room like a computer. But I mean, and I have little diploma guys, making things work for me. But I mean, I've been in deals that we've been that wrong. And it hasn't taken us 50 years to figure it out. It took about 10 months. But I've been in deals, that's why I say don't ever underestimate how wrong you can be. I think there is a world market for maybe 5 companies. This is Tom Watson Sr. about computer companies. 1943. The concept is interesting and well-founded, but in order to earn better than a C, the idea must be feasible. This is a Yale University management professor in response to Fred Smith's paper proposing reliable overnight delivery service. Smith went on to found FedEx. Now, I happen to know a little bit about FedEx. In the late 70s, early 70s, excuse me, he came up with this idea about, just as it says here, when he left Yale with his MBA. And at the time he was living in Memphis, Tennessee. He convinced a venture capital firm in New York City to give them $55 million. And that's how they started FedEx. And in his presentation to the venture capital firm, private equity firm, he's drawing on, and they said, "Why Memphis, Tennessee?" Everybody know where Memphis, Tennessee is? Down in the kind of southeastern part of the United States, a little up from the Gulf of Mexico. And he says, "Well, it's the Gulf Stream winds. The theory was they could clear all the Federal Reserve banks overnight. There's 11 or 12 Federal Reserve banks that collect the money from the commercial banks in the United States. He said they could clear them overnight. So they could clear them from New York, Chicago, Boston, San Francisco, Dallas, Atlanta, and someplace else. Okay, because the trade winds, we take off in the nighttime and we go up here where the winds are behind us, and then when the winds are behind us here, we're saving on petrol, yada, yada, yada. So it convinces these idiots, fucking private equity guys, this is all bullshit. The reason why they're in Memphis is because they have no fucking money to be anyplace else. Because the overhead's cheap, there's a lot of out-of-work engineers, da-da-da. Okay, so they go through the 55 million like shit through a goose, they spend it. In a matter of weeks. They've got 11 planes, 12 planes. The first packages that were on the first plane, the first FedEx packages, had 11 packages. 11. 7 packages were test packages from people's parents. They had 4 fucking packages. $55 million. Sounds like an impaler deal. Okay? One of his strip clubs. Okay? And then the chief engineer, the chief guy in charge of operations and keeping the planes going, didn't take much to keep 11 planes going. Okay? He came up and he says they're sitting around a table, and they hired the guy that was the former head of marketing for Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC. Why? Because he lived in Memphis. Okay? It's kind of like Kaiserslautern. We got all these guys from Kaiserslautern because we're here. Okay? So they're having a meeting, and the guy from maintenance says, we're running out of money. We don't have enough grease for the wheels and this and that. And so as he's walking out, the marketing guy, who I used to be in business with, I know the story, tells the maintenance guy, whatever his name was, hey, Harry, we're trying to come up with a slogan. What do you think? He walks to the door, he goes out the door, and then he comes back in and he says, what about, and what's Federal Express's, if you absolutely need it what did they say? If you absolutely need it overnight, Federal Express. He came up with that slogan. They spent the last $2.5 million on an advertising campaign. It didn't click. They had no money to make payroll. Fred Smith took the last $230,000 he had, flew to Las Vegas, played blackjack with the $230,000, won enough payroll. They had payroll was like $700,000. Came back, made payroll. The ad went out, and it was an instant success. It was an instant success. Now, a sidebar to that story. Before they ran out of their money, he used a trustee of his 2 younger sisters' trust. Fred Smith comes from a wealthy family. He's trustee of his 2 younger sisters' trust. He stole the money from his trust, breaking his fiduciary. Now you can probably relate to this. Breaking his fiduciary responsibility.
I can explain the legal concept. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Breaking his fiduciary responsibility to his sisters to meet payroll before he did this thing about the going to Las Vegas. His sisters sued him for a lot of money, and by the time it got to court, their stock in Federal Express was worth $240 million, and the judge threw it out of court. You have no damages. What damages? They took $3 million, and you got $240 million. They threw it out of court. Fred Smith, to the best of my knowledge, is still CEO of Federal Express, which is now Federal Express Kinko. But when guys like I or guys like Mr. Smith say they'll do whatever it takes, that's exactly what we mean. Do whatever it takes. You have to have a little luck. The saying that the guys came up with, when you need it absolutely overnight, Federal Express. 4 packages, $55 million. That's why a third of the businesses go bankrupt, a third of them break even, and a third of them make money. And you hope that a third of them wind up to be like a Apple computer or Federal Express. There's no reason anyone would want a computer in his home. Ken Olsen, chairman and founder of Digital. Now, this has been more recent. I couldn't find them on the computer the last few days, but these were pretty funny. The headline writers keep blowing hot and cold. Oat bran reduced cholesterol. Oat bran does not reduce cholesterol. Coffee can cause pancreatic cancer. Coffee does not cause pancreatic cancer. Harvard Medical has just reversed itself about what? You name it. Salt, 1950, salt causes hypertension. 1960, salt does not cause hypertension. 1970, salt causes hypertension. 1980, salt relieves hypertension. 1998, the AMA, that's American Medical Association Journal, evaluates 114 separate studies and concludes that salt does not affect hypertension either way. And they just, Harvard Medical Journal, or the American Medical Association, I forget which, just announced that eating vegetables does not promote good health. Does not promote good health. My father, God rest his soul, he told me many, many years ago, when they first started to do feminine products on television, he says, someday, to show you the state of the world, how it's fucked, son, someday they're going to talk about feminine hygiene products on television. Feminine hygiene. The first time that happened, about 20, 25 years ago, I called him up and said, hey, Dad, where are you? He says, I forget where he was. Well, what you said came true. And he said, well, what thing? I said, if you live long enough, son, I mean, everything comes true. And I says, they just got feminine hygiene products on television. He says, it's going to get worse. They're going to show you how to douche on TV pretty soon. As God is my witness, about 10 years later, same fucking thing. Then he says, they're going to show you how to put he didn't know what a tampon was. He said, they're going to show you how to put a Kotex on. And don't they not have those kind of goddamn commercials? Of course they do. It's unbelievable. If you live long enough. You know, and I had women in here when we talked about this stuff. And I said, well, I mean, why is that necessary? Now, the one thing that they haven't showed on TV is how to put a condom on. But maybe not on German TV, no. But I want them to have a little 5-foot-tall girl put a condom on with her lips. And I hope this gets on fucking YouTube. Bill Gates, in his infinite wisdom almost 30 years ago, $640K ought to be enough for anybody. Now, how wrong is that?
That's very right, because he made an operating system that needs so much.
Well, he made a system that needs, but I mean, how big, in the laptop there, how much operating system were in the little thing now?
4 gigabytes.
And how much is 4 gigabytes compared to 640K?
4,000 times more.
10,000 times more.
10,000? Yeah, 10,000. Yes.
Okay. So even Bill. Now, Impaler, do you have any words of wisdom? No words. Wow, shit.
That's what Pena said. $640,000 is enough for everybody.
Yeah, that's okay. The common idea that success spoils people by making them vain, egotistical, and self-complacent is erroneous. On the contrary, it makes them, for the most part, humble, tolerant, and kind. Failure makes people cruel and bitter. I agree. I couldn't agree with that more. It's the failure that makes us cruel and bitter. And you guys aren't old enough to be cruel and bitter yet. But if you don't get a lot more success, you'll be fucking cruel and bitter by the time you're my age, I assure you. Don't rule out big banks when raising cash. They provide half of all small business loans in the U.S. They can provide more than half now, because this is about 5 years old. Do business plans matter? Remember, we're going beyond common sense. I've said this for 25 years, maybe no longer. And I've already told you why I think business plans are for shit, because they're just a wild ass guess. Burl Crump, listen to this, honey, I'm talking about you. Burl Crump, in 1997, 1998, 98, 99, went down to Florida. Jacksonville, Florida is the home of 100 insurance companies. And our headquarters at SDI, Ron LeGrand, was just across the river. I think the St. Johns River. Maybe St. Joseph River, I forget what river. Anyway. And I used to tell my guys, Sean Casey, Ron LeGrand, Ray Rock, all these smart guys, why don't we go to the insurance companies to make a presentation? We need money. They know we listen. Okay. Bro comes down from Ontario, Canada. She makes a pitch to an insurance company on a tablecloth like this, writing with a big thick pen. Raises $55 million on a fucking tablecloth. I tell my boys, the LeGrand boys, Burl the Thumper went down there across the river that we can see from our offices and raised $55 million on a fucking tablecloth. while you're sitting here jerking each other off. And of course, like the Impaler, they had a lot of excuses. Well, it's always easier to raise money from a foreign country. Well, it's a woman. Here's a 300-pound woman. It's a woman. She uses her sex to get the 55 million. And they went on and on and on and on as they're holding their little dicks in their hand. I mean, you know, and with Tom Winkler, when we talk about Tom, he made 2,500 calls on banks, and he didn't have any business plan either. And when we'll talk about that tomorrow. Domino's Pizza, the guy who did Domino's Pizza, there's a lot of people who have a business plan. But it talks about how nobody reads them, like we talked about. Junior guys read them, guys that make decisions. You know, a lot of them don't even get read by anybody. Again, because the same slide, different reason. Who would have thought the channel would have gone bankrupt? You know, who would have thought I would have been involved in a hospital takeover? Who would have thought, you know, volcanic ash? You know, these poor businesses, these startup businesses that were funded by private equity, are all going bust. And because you can never underestimate how wrong you can be.
Do you have any comments on the Black Swan? Because we discussed the book last night briefly.
Well,
Town the derivatives guy who wrote the book.
Oh! Not really, but do you know the owners of Black Swan investment company that's based in Dubai? I thought that's what you meant. A good friend of mine, Richard Polden, a bunch of real rocket scientist guys, you know, diploma guys, you know, really smart guys, and they formed this company called Black Swan, and one Australian, one Brit. I forget where the third guy's from. But these guys, you know, are lofty. They walk on lofty the clouds. They're up there in derivative heaven, you know, talking about all this, how you take the sunlight and you make it into this and that and all this real highfalutin shit. I don't know if they're making any money though. I personally go for low-hanging fruit, and every deal that I'm involved in, I look at your plan. You tell me what it is. And I ask you, where's the low-hanging fruit? What do I mean by low-hanging fruit? The thing that you can turn into cash the quickest. Legally, morally, you know, all those things. Okay. What can we do today to make money by tomorrow? That's my primary objective. And if not tomorrow, the next day, the next day, the next week. Not 3 years out. I mean now. Most of you don't have a low-hanging fruit approach to business. We all want to hit it for 6. You know, hit it out of the park, hit a grand slam home run. That's it, okay. But you got to live and eat in the meantime. So what I normally do, I don't put my smartest guys on low-hanging fruit. I put my smartest guys on the biggest income opportunity. But I put the journeymen, the soldiers, the guys in the trenches on the low-hanging fruit. And I pay them commensurate, a very good opportunity to make a lot of money if they're successful at bringing in the low-hanging fruit. If they're not successful in bringing in the low-hanging fruit, I throw them out. And all my deals, you either are successful or you get thrown out. And they know that. And that's why I've learned, I used to be a big thing about building the culture of the company, like Impaler. But I don't believe so much in it. I believe in the culture, but now I hire people on 3 and 6 month contracts. No obligation, you don't have to have withholding tax and all the other bullshit. Contract for 3 or 6 months, and if they're successful at the end of 3 months, but I'm still not sure, I extended another 3-month contract, but by the end of 6 months I know, and then I can make them a permanent employee. But in the meantime, they have to pick off low-hanging fruit. And if they don't pick off low-hanging fruit, then they're adios. Either I wait to the end of the contract and I don't renew it, or I don't even wait till the end of the contract. I like to have 1-month contracts where people feel uncomfortable with 1-month contracts. You know, some people don't. Some people that are really ballsy, have a lot of confidence in themselves, I'll take a 1-month contract. I've had people come to me, I'll work for free. Auntie Perkov, Auntie, I hope you listen to this. Came to me, I'll work for free for a year. I'll show you what I can do. He worked 11 months in 1 week for free. And he was dynamite. I mean, he was a great kid, smart kid. He's a big successful guy now in property. Why did he go to fucking property? Because like he said, Dan, any fucking monkey can make money in property. That's exactly what he did. God love him. You know? He must be now 35, 38. And then he said, then he branched out and said, oh, mortgage brokering, this is like stealing money. Taking money for old rope, that's an English saying. Smart guy. Anyway, low-hanging fruit. So when I look at your deals, I say, okay, where's the low-hanging fruit? Most of you don't have any low-hanging fruit. And then it's not possible. This is Kaiser slot. We can't do it. Same old shit. When, of course, it is possible. It is possible. I remember a property deal, a German property deal we did in the late 90s. The directors were having drinks in the library. Herr Professor. I said, I'm just teasing you, don't have to call me Herr Professor. I just did that for the other assholes. He says, okay. I said, Dan, Mr. Peña is my dad. And he says, oh, and again, the founder, I won't say his name because you guys might know him. He says, we'll call him Hans again. How come Hans didn't, they said it much more eloquently than this, I'm about to say. Why didn't Hans think of this? The low-hanging fruit I'm talking about. I don't know. Why don't we ask him? We don't want to ask him. What's that? So at dinner I did ask him. And Hans said, I thought of it, but I thought I didn't want to demean the board by getting involved in a whole hanging fruit deal that we were just trying to grub around money for cash flow in the beginning. I wanted us to do big deals. He didn't want to demean himself. He said the board, but he meant himself. He didn't want to embarrass himself to have to grub around and do deals for 50,000 euros, or 100,000 euros, or whatever the number was. I remember the numbers now. When we were talking about making tens of millions of euros. The board wasn't insulted. The board thought it was a good goddamn idea. You know? Because they asked smart questions. Well, what's the budget? How much money do we have? You know? And this is before they joined the board. Now, admittedly, they were influenced by me being on the board. There's no question about that. I'm sure if they would have asked Hans harder questions, if there was just Hans. But they didn't ask them because we're sitting in, down here at the castle. I had the limos picking them up and all this shit. And so they felt important. And everybody wants to feel important. The only thing we didn't have is we didn't have hookers. I wouldn't do hookers in my own house. I'm not opposed to hookers, but I certainly wouldn't do it in my own house. And but we didn't do low-hanging fruit. So think about it. Where's your low-hanging fruit? Logic, remember, we're still talking about common sense, beyond common sense. Logic is a logical process which leads to an incorrect conclusion. Logic dictates. And in property, there's a lot of logic dictates. This has never been done before when you're talking about cap. And the more I thought about that, I still think it's expensive. I still think it's... You got to fuck that market. I got to go to your market. Because my market, that's expensive.
10.6.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, that's expensive. There's a dichotomy there. There's something's fucked up.